guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Bookshelves and Beyond. And today I have my June wrap up for you all. I know technically we're still in June, but I don't think I'm going to finish a book after I upload this video. So I have completed my June for all intents and purposes, and I want to do this video. I think I read about 4 books last month, but I'm not really sure. But this month I only read 3. However, again, I was really busy, but I'm trying to read a lot more now. So I have got 2 books on the go currently, so hopefully next month will be a lot better. But yeah, I've read 3 books this month, and I'm going to go in order of what I've read. So the first book that I read in June is actually A Curse of Blood and Wolves by Melissa McTernan, which is this book. And if you watched my last book unboxing, then you would have seen this. This was in the Fairy Loot Romantasy box for May, I believe, and this is the book that we got. And I read it first because I've never picked up a book so quickly in my life, and this book screamed a bit of me as soon as I kind of read what it was about. So it's basically about a werewolf and a human girl. It's a kind of retelling, or is it called a retelling? It's got references to Little Red Riding Hood anyway. I think it's called a retelling, but I'm not too sure. A reimagining of Little Red Riding Hood. Anyway, that's what it is. The werewolf guy, which is this guy here, is basically stalking the human girl, and she lives like in the middle of the woods and in like a cute little house, and she works in a bar, so she walks home really late at night, and he will wait for her at the edge of the woods and walk her through and like walk her home and watch her. And one day she always knows that he's there. She can sense him but can't see him, and one day he kind of shows her, his face to her, and as soon as he does, she gets attacked by another werewolf. He saves her from the werewolf, but in doing so also turns into a werewolf, and then she's like, what the hell is happening? She drags him into her house, and then it kind of goes from there. And yeah, it's a romantasy book, so you can kind of guess what it's got in it. It's quite steamy as well, but I really enjoyed this book. But yeah, these are the 2 main characters. I can't remember their names, and that sounds really bad, but I read this book so flipping quickly because I loved it so flipping much. And because I read it quickly, I don't think the contents have stuck in my brain very well. But her name is Ruby. I just can't remember his name. Oh, it's Rafe. I've just remembered. It's Rafe. So it's Ruby and Rafe, and this is the first book to a trilogy as well, which is called The Wolf Brothers. So I don't think this is spoiling it, I don't think. But there's 3 brothers, so the main werewolf in this has 2 other brothers, and I'm guessing the series is about, each book is about a different couple to do with a different brother, if that makes sense. And they both appear in this book, and the next book, we know, like, when you read this, you know for sure who it's going to be about and who it's going to involve, because they are very heavily included in the end of this book anyway. But really lovely book, and of course it's got lovely artwork on it as well. I won't obviously spend ages on this because there is a video of me showing it properly, but this is Ruby, the female character, and she's really cool. She's quite gothic and quite alternative. She got bullied as a child because her parents passed away, and everyone thought that she was a weirdo and all this sort of thing. So there's a lot to the book. Really good. It had a great story and it really was a bit of me. I went through this book so quickly, I couldn't put it down, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I gave this book 4 stars, and it could have been a 5, very easily have been a 5. I don't know why I didn't give it a 5, but I think it was a lot of back and forth between the characters, a lot of I don't deserve you, I'm gonna save you from me, so I'm gonna run away, and there was a lot of back and forth in that kind of sense, and it was like a bit repetitive, but other than that it was a really good book. And you know, it's quite short as well, and I think it's about 350 something pages, so it's a really short book anyway, so it's not like you're reading it forever and it keeps on repeating it. It's only a few times, so it's not too bad. But yeah, I really did enjoy this book, and I highly recommend this to anyone who likes romantasy books. I think FairyLoot did a really good job of picking this book as one of their subscription box books. Yeah. That's the words I'm trying to find. So the second book that I read of June, so the next 2 books that I read actually, sorry, are both on my Kindle, and I actually read them really quickly. I feel like I read quicker on my Kindle, which is bizarre because the pages, there's the same amount of pages, but for some reason I just tend to read a lot quicker on my Kindle. I don't know if it's because it's easier to read on there, I'm not too sure, but anyway. I read the next 2 on my lovely Kindle, and the first one that I read is a book called When We Fall, which is by Shane Ford. So I had this downloaded on my Kindle since I first got my Kindle last year, like the beginning of last year, so it would have been like January last year I think. And I follow a book page on Facebook, I can't remember, I think they're called Nose in a Book. And they post quite regularly links to free books on Amazon, and this was one of the books that was free at the time. I don't know if it still is. So I downloaded it then, and I never ever got to it, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and make it a goal of mine to read more books on my Kindle, because I've got a lot on there and I just don't touch them. So that's what I wanted to do. So I read this book, When We Fall by Shane Ford. I ended up actually rating it about 4 stars because I thought it was really good, and again it was a really simple book to read, and I think that's probably why I liked it so much. It was such a good book to read. Not many ratings on Goodreads, so you know, that is one thing to note, but I thought it was really good. So it was about a girl who had, all the books that I read this month are awfully similar. Well, the last 2 are awfully similar, so I'm like trying to remember. So When We Fall was about a girl who had moved into, I'm getting it confused. She lived in a nice area of somewhere, I can't remember where it was, somewhere in America, but she lived in like a little cottage that I think she inherited from her grandmother or something like that. I think that's it anyway. Inherited from someone. But all the other houses on the street are really nice. There's a house across the street that she's never ever seen anyone go in, but it's like really well maintained. Like that, she's never seen anyone live there, but they have gardeners there every week and caretakers there every week and stuff like that. And she's always been like, well, what's the point if no one lived there, sort of thing. And she's always assumed that it's been owned by a very wealthy person who has multiple different homes and all that sort of thing. One day she gets home from her job and she drives home and she pulls up to her house and her car breaks down right on her driveway. And she isn't very well off at all. Like, she inherited this house, so it's, you know, she doesn't pay for the house, but other than that she works as a barista. She's not very well off. And while she's sitting there like crying into her arms about the fact that her car is just broken down and she doesn't know how she's going to pay for it and all that, there is a car that pulls into the house across the road, and she's like, oh, that's so bizarre, because she's obviously never seen anyone that lives there, and it was quite late at night, so she was like, that's bizarre. And so instead of getting out her car going inside and taking her groceries in or whatever, she stays there and she stares into her rearview mirror, watching this guy getting out of his car, and he ends up walking over to her car and asking like why she's staring, sort of thing. So she ends up meeting this guy, and it turns out that there's this guy that actually does own the house and does live there, although she's never ever seen him. They get along really well and all that sort of thing, and their relationship progresses. It seems like a really pretty normal book on the surface, but I must say it was a bit gross. I don't know if gross is the right term because people like different things, but it wasn't necessarily a love triangle. It was just that, I don't know how I can say this and make it YouTube friendly, but it was spicy at points anyway in the book. But the male protagonist in the book was a bit creepy, and for some reason he enjoyed having multiple people involved, and yeah, it was a bit odd. And I have to admit, like, even though I gave this book 4 stars, I think it was because everything else about the book I really liked, but that bit I was a bit like, oh, I don't know how I feel about it. Anyway, this is part of a series called Love Your Enemy. I might continue with it. I'm not too sure, but because I didn't pay for this book, I think it was free for me, so I don't know whether I will continue with the rest of the series because I might have to pay for it. But there's loads. I think there's about 10 books in the series, but the books are quite short, to be fair. This one was only 186 pages, so it was quite short. But yeah, it was a bit, I wasn't quite sure how I felt about it. But anyway, that is the other book that I read. And then moving on to the third book that I read of June. Like I said, they're kind of quite similar, and again, I read this on my Kindle as well. This is one that I also downloaded for free like a year ago, forgot about, never read it, and then I've only just read it now. Really quick read again, and I also gave this one 4 stars. And it's called Playing the Game by L.M. Reid, and it's part of a series called Making the Play series, and there's 3 books in the series. It is a NFL romance. Well, that was how it was advertised to me, as an NFL romance, and the front cover is a guy in like the armed guards and everything. So I was reading it in the hopes of getting more NFL related bits in there, but there wasn't. The main guy just happened to be an NFL player, but there was hardly any scenes relating to him actually being a player, because the main female never went to watch him until the very end. And you know, anyway, it was a good book. I mean, I gave it 4 stars, and again, it was steamy, spicy. It had some scenes in there that were spicy, but it kind of lacked a bit more, just a little bit of something unique for me. I think the book was very generic, and I think the book's plot wasn't anything special. I've read books like this before that do it better, and this book was also reasonably short, just at like 200 and something pages. So, you know, if it was more pages, it might have been able to fit a little bit more of it, like worthwhile stuff in there. It kind of seemed a bit rushed, and it's a enemies to lovers romance, and I felt like they were enemies for this amount of the book, and then they were lovers for this amount of the book. And it kind of felt a bit like, for the reader, we obviously don't have the luxury of reading through their backstory, so as a writer they kind of have to show us the weight of how much these people didn't like each other before and don't like each other. But for me, it's a bit bizarre. The main female character is a bit of a rebel. She not necessarily sleeps around, but she's been known to kind of go between partners, and she gets kicked out of her college that she's currently going to and ends up having to move in with her brother for a period of time. Her brother is quite a successful football player, American football player, and she hates his best friend, who's also an NFL American football player. That's the premise, and because she moves back in with her brother, she sees the friend more and all that sort of thing. So we're told as a reader that they absolutely hate each other, and there's a scene at the beginning where we kind of gather that by the reactions of the people, but it goes straight into they're starting to have feelings for each other instead of building up to that point. It's like, I don't know if any of you have ever read, there is a series by Anna Huang called Twisted Love series, and Twisted Hate is an enemies to lovers romance, and I personally think that did enemies to lovers really, really well, because there was a huge chunk at the beginning of the book that was the enemies part. Do you know what I mean? It kind of really emphasised to us as the reader that these two characters really do hate each other. But for some reason in this book I didn't really get much of that, and I felt like it probably could have worked on a better I'm not too sure how to word it, but a better way of kind of explaining to us as the reader that these two people don't like each other. And it reminded me a lot of The Hating Game, and it had a lot of plot stuff that was very similar to The Hating Game. Now I don't know which came out first, so I don't know who's copying who, but very, very similar. And I'm obviously, I don't actually mean that they're copying each other, because I'm sure they're not, but because I've read a book that already has those similar key points in there, and because I enjoyed it so incredibly much, it's kind of like, I've done this, I've been there, done that, and I've had it better before. So, you know, still 4 stars, I'm being generous perhaps, and I did enjoy it, and the characters were alright, I guess. Looking back at it now, I don't know why I gave it 4 stars, maybe I was in a generous mood, but anyway, 4 stars for that one. That is all the books that I read in June, and like I say, they're all pretty similar. They're all romance based, and I think I was just in the mood for romance this month, which is why I read what I have read. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys enjoy me rambling on. Let me know in the comments below what you managed to read this month, and if you didn't get to read this month, let me know your goals for next month. I really want to know what you guys are planning on reading. I am planning on, hopefully, I am gonna finish the Atlas 6, because I started that at the beginning of this month and I've not really been enjoying it, and I'm at like 150 pages in and I've not really been enjoying it, so I thought I'd put it down for a bit. I was in the mood for romance anyway, so I thought I'm gonna put it down for a bit, start it up again next month. So that's my plan. I'm also currently reading Satan's Affair by, what's the author's name? Satan's Affair by H.D. Carlton. So this is the author that does the Hunting / Haunting Adeline series. Satan's Affair is actually the book before those, that Cat and Mouse duology, and it's recommended that you read Satan's Affair first, so that's what I'm doing, because I plan on reading the Cat and Mouse duology. I've been recommended it a lot, and I know that there's a lot of trigger warnings and things like that, so obviously if you're planning on reading it, please go on their website and read all of them properly before you dive into these books. But I personally am quite excited to read them. I haven't read anything like that before, and reading Satan's Affair, it's kind of very new to what I usually read, but I am enjoying it. It's really interesting. So that is what hopefully will be on my wrap up next month. Also, don't forget to follow me on all of my social media. It means a lot to me, and I always include it here and also in the description box below. And I will see you guys as always next week. Bye!